Right. Super. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining. I'm delighted to see you on the call. So we've got some old friends and you here, which is great. So thank you for joining the first session of Write My Soul Story course, and which is I'm going to start you off on a journey today and give you a flavour of the full course. I'm going to give you some homework to do as well. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you all to mute yourselves during kind of when I'm presenting. And we're going to have I'm going to stop at points. We're going to have time at the end for questions and discussion. But it'd be good if you can mute yourself. Please also say a little prayer for technological mercies. I'm actually connecting to fibre next week. I've had a nightmare with broadband, and I'm praying that we're going to have no problems with sound quality at the moment. I believe that you can hear me okay. The sound's okay at the moment. Is that right? Brilliant. Right. If you have any problems, please just unmute and just tell me, interrupt me if necessary, if you can't hear me, because I can't see the chat once I'm actually into this. So I think let's get started, and hopefully I believe that I will see if anybody else comes in. Now, this course is basically designed to help you write about your experiences of God, or to tell what I like to call your soul story, and it's in the form of an autobiography or memoir. And I suspect that people on this course, some of whom I know, some who don't, may be at very different stages of thinking about this. It may be just some vague idea that you think you might want to explore a bit further. It might be that during this time of enforced retreat caused by COVID-19 that you got to thinking about that book, that you'd all finally writing that book you'd always thought about. You may have never written more than a school essay, or you may be a much more experienced writer. You might have written for work, for example. You might even have written a book before, but now want to explore what God's calling you to share with others about your journey with him. But really, wherever you are on that journey, this is a course for you. The idea of this course actually came to me during lockdown, because I had a number of people began to approach me, and they said to me, would you help us with writing our own story? They wanted to write a book about their walk with God. Because I found that the problem was that most of them just didn't know where to start. And that really resonated with me, because I can remember feeling completely at sea when I began the process of writing my autobiography. Because of all this, I think that, I recognize this. I think a lot of people, they have these wonderful stories to tell, but their books remain just a vague idea, which I think could be quite tragic, because there are so many amazing stories out there which need to be told, which can be told, which can encourage, inspire, and help other people on their faith journey. So if that in any way describes you, then this is the course for you. Now, the thinking behind this course is based upon my own experience of calling from God, and it covers all the things I basically wish I'd known when I started out. It's about the various stages of writing a book, from pinning down to who you're actually writing for, to structuring and storyboarding your story, and writing in a way that really engages readers, right the way through to editing and finding a publisher and even promoting your book. Now, I never expected to be a published author. In fact, up until a few years ago, I was far too busy working to bring up a family, even to consider putting pen to paper. But you never know what's around the corner, and how God could work in your life. Now, it's in 2014, I was having a great time working with Christian aid agency World Vision. And amazingly, there are actually two other people who used to be at World Vision on this call with me, which is fantastic. They will recognize this. I was running around all over the world. I was spending 1 week in Asia, the next in Africa, meeting some amazingly inspirational people, when to my shock, I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Suddenly, my world shrunk. Bear with me a second. Let me see if I can change the screen. There we are. Suddenly, there we are, looking rather different. My world shrunk. One moment I was getting on and off planes like buses, and the next I was actually in isolation, as the chemotherapy caused my immune system to actually collapse, and I was unable even to see my family. So there's some of what's been happening recently feels horribly familiar. But after years of frantic activity, I was actually finally forced to be still I suppose, just to be still and know that he is God. And having been brought to this standstill, I began to look back over my life. And for the first time, I began to see how God had always been there. I say how his unseen hand had maybe guided my trajectory, and how he'd really taken me down certain paths in my life, and also how he lifted me up even in the darkest moments. And when I was ill, I kept being given this passage from Psalm 118:17. I will not die, but will live and declare the works of the Lord. And this scripture came to me like a life raft in a stormy sea, and I can tell you, I clung onto it for dear life. But I also recognized in this passage a call to share my experience of God and to record how he worked in my life, including my experience with cancer. So in the midst of my illness, I began to write an account of my faith journey. And initially, I wrote the story as a legacy for my family. I had two children, both school age, 10 and 16 at the time. It's so difficult to go through this when you've got young children. I really wanted my children to know how much God loved me, even was standing by me, even as I faced potentially leaving them. I was very worried about their faith journey. And I never dreamt the book would be published. I thought I might print it out and ring bind it for my kids. But then God did something absolutely amazing in my life. The fact that I'm talking to you now shows that. And my writing efforts became about something much bigger. And I began to see how in telling my story, I could provide reassurance to other people who felt maybe they'd been looking for God in all the wrong places, or had struggled to find him in the midst of some really challenging situations. And the resulting book, Sea Change, was published by Christian publisher Authentic Media in 2016. It's now a best-selling autobiography, Christian autobiography, and was even nominated as CRT Christian Biography of the Year in 2017. So suddenly, I was reaching an audience far beyond my family. In fact, just the other day, I was told by a former World Vision colleague that it was now popular in Myanmar, of all places, and was doing the rounds in Myanmar. The whole thing really is proof that God can really take the lemons of our life and actually turn them into lemonade. In fact, the act of sharing my story, of declaring how he'd worked in my life, set in train a whole stream of events that I couldn't really have foreseen. At the age of 55, an age where most female presenters are being retired, I found myself presenting a TV show on Premier Christian channel TBN called Living a Transformed Life. And working with Authentic, I published a guide to that show, and which is also a reflection guide to company Sea Changed, which helps other people to reflect how God has used the circumstances of their lives to transform them and to really understand their own story, which was kind of almost the beginning of the genesis of what I'm doing now. I'm also now in the process of editing my third book with Authentic called Soul Scribe, Connecting Your Story with God's Narrative, which looks at how to understand and articulate your own faith journey in a way that will inspire others. Now, originally, this course was going to come after the book, but the publication has been slightly delayed by COVID-19 crisis, and it's now going to be coming out in February 2021. But the work that we're going to do draws upon some of the insights from this book, so it draws upon the thinking that went into this book. I also self-published a book, a children's book called Wife of the Wind, which was illustrated by my late aunt, the artist Teresa Nicholas, and the proceeds of that go to breast cancer care. And later on in this course, when I come to look at how to get your book published, I talk about my experience and the pros and cons of self-publishing versus going down this route of getting a publisher to take your manuscript. I think it's fair to say that the whole experience of writing my story changed my life. Such was the momentum created by Sea Change that 4 years ago, I did something fairly radical, and I stepped out of World Vision to focus on what seemed to be this God-given mission to declare the works of God. And I decided I'd do that in 3 ways. First of all, as an author, and I'm actually now working on my 4th book with Authentic. So you never know what this might start off for you. I've also found that writing my story has opened up a whole world of opportunities for ministry, from writing blogs to Bible Plans for You version, and with the media, and of course just talking to people. I continue to be a preacher. I'm a lay preacher with the Church of St. Peter and St. Paul in Only, where I live. And I found a real wealth of connection between the process of writing for publication and writing sermons for congregations. Does anyone here involved in ministry in any way, in a lay capacity or any other way? Put up your hand. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think you're going to find that the two seem to really feed off and enrich each other. And I found that really valuable. Christabel, I've got a raised hand here. Christabel, can you unmute yourself and say, were you raising your hand to say you're in ministry?
Yes, yes.
Ah, brilliant. I just want to check there wasn't a problem. Fantastic, thank you. Like many other authors, I've also found myself speaking at other churches, Christian groups and Christian events. And I find that's amazing because that's when you really begin to engage with your readers. I love doing all this because you meet so many people with amazing stories. When you start talking to people, you hear their amazing stories. And it really brought home to me how many stories need to be told. Which brings me to the last area, which is my work as a consultant, helping people to understand and articulate the Christian narrative. Now, these are a few of the organisations I've worked with, but I also worked with individual Christians on a one-to-one basis to help them shape the narrative of their Christian stories and to create books for publication. And I found that something I really loved doing. And it was from this work the idea of this course was born, because I just felt I wanted to help more people release their stories and get them out there into the world where God can take your words and do things with them which you couldn't even imagine. I think what has become really clear to me over the years is that God doesn't bless us only for ourselves. When we're called to take those blessings and to share them. And when we use our words to bless even one other person, God can take this and do really extraordinary things with it. So I'll say now, who knows? The book you have inside of you may be a blessing that God intends for the nations. Who knows what he plans to do? But before we dive into this course, bear me a second. Before we dive into this course, I think it's really important to make sure that we're all grounded in prayer. So can I suggest that we just take a moment to be still and to come before God? So let's just be still a moment. I shall lead us in prayer. Dear Lord and Father, we thank you so much for this time together and for the technology that makes this possible. It's so wonderful to come together in fellowship in this way, even when we can't be together face to face. Lord, we lift up this time to you now and pray that you will open our eyes, our ears and our hearts to understand the message that you want us to share with others. Each of us will have a unique experience of walking with you. And we pray this course will help us to appreciate the ways in which you guide us, and that in sharing our soul stories, we may be a blessing to others. And that all we say, write and do will be to your glory. In the name of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Saviour. Amen.
Amen.
Now, I think I was going to, I was actually meant to share this before. I've got my slides the wrong way around. There we are. This was a very kind comment that actually came from the last round of people who took my course. Emma had this amazing story to tell, but felt a bit daunted by the whole process of writing. But now she's really committed to write, and I'm working with her and others to help bring the story to completion. One thing I would say is there probably aren't as many people on today's session as last time I ran this, thanks to Facebook Ads Manager. We're still trying to get to the bottom of why this is, but last Monday, Facebook just turned off my advertising. And I confess I was so busy, I didn't even notice until Friday when I manually turned it back on again. But I'm really pleased all of you found out about the course one way or another. And actually, it may be for the best, because I actually find it works a lot better when you have a smaller group and there's more opportunity of interacting with each other in the Zoom calls. So I just want to say that it's probably for the best. Right. Call to communicate. God speaks into our lives in a myriad of ways to let us know how much he loves us, and it gives our Creator great joy when we acknowledge his love and guidance. And we know that he doesn't give us knowledge of his presence and experience of his love as a blessing for us alone. We're told to let our light shine before others to glorify him and tell how much God has done for us. So the question is, how do we do this? Now, God has given us the power of communication, the gift of words, and we're called to use those words to glorify him. I found out that the Latin word vocare, which means to call, comes from the same root as vocalis, which means having or finding your voice. So we are literally called to find our voice and share his good news and what this means for us personally. In Revelation, we're told that they overcame him by the devil, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. So I think we all would agree testimonies can be truly powerful if told well. Now, the biblical concept of testimony is closely related to the idea of giving testimony in a court of law, which involves providing evidence to prove the truth of a claim. So we are witnesses to the truth that Jesus Christ is the only Son of God, God from God, light from light, true God from true God. And while people can argue with your theology, they can't argue with your experience. They can't argue with your story. There's been a lot of focus in the media over the last few years about declining church attendance. And surveys talk about how millennials in particular have lost trust in the institution of the church, but there's still a real opportunity to connect as the body of Christ through telling our own stories of how we came to faith, our own stories of how we met Jesus and what this meant for us. And the more authentic your witness, the more powerfully it can impact people. One thing I've found is that all too often Christian testimonies can be really quite formulaic and oversimplified. They're kind of paint a very black and white image of a former life without Christ that is unremittingly ghastly, it's dark and painful. And they focus on this moment of dramatic conversion, after which life becomes this continuous stream of joy. I think probably everybody here will agree that is not how it works. And these kind of testimonies can sound very dramatic, but because they don't relate to most people's reality and most people's experience, they can actually be discouraging rather than encouraging. And the reality is, for most people, conversion and coming to know Jesus is a gradual process. It's what the Apostle Paul called an anakenosis, which means a gradual renewing of the mind. And most people's paths to God aren't necessarily a straight line. Their journey is going to involve many twists and turns. I like this image because I guess it speaks to this. You know, our journeys, our story is going to include times of joy, of the presence of God, but they may also include times when he feels absent. They may include times of reassurance, but they may include times of doubt as well. And it's that reality that people can connect with, which is why there is such a market, a vibrant market for Christian autobiographies and memoirs. Now, I want to talk about different types of Christian books because the most recently available figures from Nielsen show the Christian book market in the UK has been worth around about £183 million per year. Now that puts the value of the Christian book sector at between about 11% of total UK book sales. That is really big. And there are a wide range of Christian book publishers available, like SPCK, Hod of Faith, HarperCollins, Thomas Nelson, IVP, and my own publisher, Authentic Media. The Christian book market, of course, includes a range of different types of books, including, of course, the best-selling book of all time. There are so many Bibles on sale. But there are a lot of other types of books, including what's called expository non-fiction. Those are books that help people to understand and develop their faith. They might be Bible studies, theological studies, spiritual growth and ministry development books. There's also devotional books, and those include things like prayer books and these lovely gift books that are available. Christian fiction. Now, this is a growing market, although I'd say it's one of the most challenging in the Christian sector, because of course there is such a dynamic secular book market it's competing against, but it is growing. And of course, narrative non-fiction. That is a book that tells a story which is true in the form of an autobiography, memoir, or biography. And this is a huge sector of the Christian book market. And this course is focused specifically on this part of the market, and particularly on autobiographies and memoirs, your story as a Christian. So next question really is, what do we mean by autobiography or memoir? Because I'm sure most of us have got an idea, but I'm not sure many of us, some of us tend to merge the two. Well, traditionally, an autobiography tells your story chronologically, and it covers the whole of your lifespan to date, so from your childhood to the present day, and it's primarily concerned with establishing historical fact. A memoir, on the other hand, has a more specific timeline and often a shorter timeline, and it often focuses on part of your life. And it's really about conveying an emotional truth. It provides an intimate insight into an author's worldview or experience. So I'm sure you can see immediately that actually, in many ways, an account of a Christian life is quite unique because it needs to be a melding of the two. There's something totally immersive about a book that can't be replicated by any other form of communication, because the written word relies so much upon a reader's imagination, and it offers the opportunity for the reader to actually internalize what they're reading, the story they're reading, and to make it their own. And this is particularly true of an autobiography or memoir, where the author invites the reader into their own consciousness, effectively. You invite somebody to identify with your most intimate experiences of God. And it's so powerful when you're writing about your faith journey. So as such, your book needs to convey this profound emotional truth of your experience of God, but it also needs to be rooted in the very real details of your life, which give your story that ring of authenticity and give it that credibility. And I think the potency to change lives. So it needs to be a melding between the two. When it comes to timescale, in many ways, this will be dictated by your journey as well as faith as a Christian. You can start your journey from your childhood, but it may well be that you actually want to start your journey further on in your life when you maybe began on a faith journey as an adult. So you need to just set the timeline. The timeline is more flexible, and you just set the timeline that works for you. But before we start on any of this, I want to spend most of the time today thinking about somebody else rather than you. Well, think about your reader. Because unless you're writing your book for an audience of one, i.e. yourself, this whole process needs to begin with thinking about your reader and who your reader is. Now, there's a lady on here who used to be involved in communications at World Vision. I'm sure she's heard me saying this many times before. All good communication begins with understanding your audience. Jesus Christ was possibly the greatest communicator the world has ever known. His words ring down the ages and have transformed the world and so many lives over the centuries. In fact, it has been said that for over 2,000 years, he has had greater effect on the whole world than all the rulers, kings and emperors, scientists and philosophers put together. And one of the greatest characteristics of Christ's communication was that it was always audience specific. He was amazingly attentive to other people. He was attentive enough to spot the forgotten and the outliers, Bartimaeus, Zacharias, the suffering woman in the crowd who reached out to touch his cloak. And his communication was always informed by and guided by the insights born of that attentiveness. He knew his audience. I also remember my mother saying to me when I was a child, you know, you were born with one mouth and two ears for a reason. And I think if we're to effectively share our experience of Jesus, we need to think about our readers. We need to be able to listen to and think about our readers and to write for them. Now, I'm sure at this point, a lot of people at this point tend to say, well, you know, my book is for everyone. But there is an old adage that says, if you write for everyone and you market to everyone, you sell to no one. And I can tell you now that one of the things that's most likely to guarantee that your manuscript ends up in a publisher's recycling bin is a proposal that says, this is a book for everyone. And that applies to the Christian book market just as much as any other, for some very practical reasons indeed. Bear with me a second. There we are. The problem with targeting a very wide audience is that, first of all, you're competing with a lot of other authors, and the number of authors out there is only increasing. UNESCO estimates that 2.2 million new books are published every year, and that is growing exponentially, particularly because of self-publishing. With the success of platforms like Amazon Kindle Direct, the number of self-published books has grown by about 40% over the last couple of years, and it's continuing to grow. And for publishers, the increasing number of books published each year means increased competition for readers' time and money. And as the competition begins to grow, the effort it's going to take to encourage readers and convince readers to spend money on your book or to spend time with your book is going to continue to be more difficult. And the one thing that publishers know is that reaching a wide audience costs a lot of money in terms of marketing. It requires significant advertising spend and promotion across lots of different marketing channels. And when a publisher looks at a book proposal, of course they're concerned with the quality of the manuscript, but they also want to know how easy it's going to be to market and to sell your book, and so to recoup the return that they're going to make on investing in you. And a big marketing spend means that they're going to be expecting you to sell an awful lot of books. And the harsh reality is that unless you're J.K. Rowling, the average sale for a first-time author will be around 2,000 copies. That is regarded as an average first print run. And this is really important to recognise if you're thinking about going down the self-publishing route, which I'm going to go into in detail in the fourth session in this course. There are always outliers which go viral, like 50 Shades of Grey, although I don't think any of you are going to try and write a book like that. But it's worth it. There are very, very few books, and they tend to stand out for not always the right reasons, that go viral. But in general, it's like you'd have to spend an awful lot of your own money and time to invest in mass marketing, and it's very unlikely you will have either enough money or enough time to sell your books to the level of people you'd want in a mass market audience. So the whole business of reaching your audience has also been complicated by this move from what's called bricks to clicks. Once upon a time, Christian bookshops were one of the bastions of frontline ministry. I used to love going to Christian bookshops and just spending time browsing. And people would go into bookshops, and often in browsing, they would find just the right book to help them in their faith journey. But sadly, many Christian bookshops are really struggling and closing down, and that's only likely to be made worse by COVID-19 and the economic impact of this. And as book sales shift online to outlets like eden.co.uk, Aslan and christianbook.com, it becomes much harder to actually browse. If you think about how you go into online things like Amazon, it's much, much harder to browse and look for things. You tend to go in with a much clearer idea of what it is you're actually looking for. So if you take that to a book environment, it means that you need to be successful in that environment. You need to know your audience very well and provide them with a clear hook that they can catch on to, they can recognize and look for. And this whole idea of a hook is something I'm going to go into in detail in session 2. So to summarize, the lesson for a non-fiction writer is for your book to be a success, you need to focus on a niche audience and their needs. So what I want to do now is take you through thinking about who you want to write for. So who you imagine reading your words and why they will read your words. Okay, you may want to kind of take some notes. I'll come on to this in a moment, but your reader can be differentiated in a variety of different ways in terms of demographics, psychographics, behaviors, and geography. Now, some of you may be familiar with marketing, some of you may not. It may sound very complicated if you're not. But this is how publishers think about their readers. So if they think in these terms, you need to be able to think in these terms as well. It's not as hard as it sounds, though. So we're going to go through this now and have a look at your readers. And I can see you've got Olive. You're Olive. I can see you on the course. You've done this before. It's not completely impossible, is it?
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me again, and thank you.
It's lovely to have you here again. But yeah, so she can maybe, when we come to discussion, but she might be able to tell you a little bit about the experience of doing this. But as we go through this, you may want to take some notes, but you're also going to have access to this presentation afterwards on my website. And I'm also going to provide you with a template as well, which I'll come on to in a moment. So let's start off having a look at demographics. Now, a demographic is a particular section of the population, and it includes things like age, gender, occupation, and family size. Now, actual hard data relating to the demographics of Christian readership is pretty hard to come by. In fact, the most up-to-date I could find was a US survey by Nielsen Books from 2014. But according to this, because it just gives us an idea, according to this, 59% of Christian non-fiction buyers are female, 52% earn under $50,000, and 51% are under 45 years of age. So that's not our market, that's an American market. But just to give you a flavour, that's the kind of figures that publishers will think about when they're assessing a book for publication. They will think, how broad is the readership of this potential publication? So let's have a look at how you can go about identifying your readers. So first of all, what age range, for example, are you thinking about writing for? Do you see your book or your story being read by people maybe of same age as you, maybe working age, or maybe in retirement? Or maybe you may be looking at writing a book targeted at young adults, is another potential market. So think first of all about the age of your reader and the potential age. Secondly, you need to think about gender. Now, your book may appeal to both genders. Many autobiographies do. But is there something in your story that may make it appeal more to one gender than another? My book, Sea Change, for example, talked about my struggle with breast cancer. And so it had an obvious connection with and appeal to women, although it is sold to an awful lot of men. So I think one of the second questions you need to ask yourself is there some aspect about your story that has a specific gender appeal? Thirdly, if you think about occupation, you don't have to do this in a very detailed way, but it's worth thinking about what type of occupations your potential readers might be in, and also what kind of income levels, as this may affect your readers' book buying habits. There are always exceptions, but generally, those with higher income levels are more likely to be willing to try out unknown authors. They tend to be more willing, they'll probably buy more books, they're more willing to try out somebody they don't know, whereas those with lower income levels may only buy a book if it's by a very well-known author, or, and this is where the opportunity lies, seems to meet a very obviously felt need. It's very obvious about the need it meets. And this impacts about how you approach telling your story, whether it's going to be focused more on telling your journey, or whether it's going to be very overt in terms of packaging the lessons you've learned in a way that can help others. So it's worth thinking about what kind of occupations do you imagine your readers being in? So think broad brushstroke, white collar office workers, professions, blue collar, etc. And sort of the type of income levels, because that can help you decide how you're going to package your story. Well, if you think about family situation, are your readers, for example, likely to have young families, or they like to be retired with grandchildren? Are they millennial singles, for example? Because all of this is going to be important to how they relate to your story. And there may be aspects of your story that relate to people in particular family situations. That's something certainly I found in the course so far that has come up for quite a few people who've done this. Secondly, so that's demographics. Secondly, have a think about psychographics. Now, this is not as grand as it sounds. It's another way of thinking about audiences used in marketing. Basically, what it does is it looks beyond demographics to how people think about things. So the kind of things that you want to think about here are your readers' attitude and opinions. This is how they look at the world, and it's a vast category and it can encompass many different areas. But classically, it will include their political beliefs. For example, whether they come at the world from a more socialist or more conservative perspective, and also whether they might have a more nationally focused view or a more global worldview. Are they more global citizens? But it also includes their views, for example, on areas such as environmentalism and issues around sexuality. So their views on key world issues, because all of this will affect the kind of books that they're going to be interested in. And when you do this, it's critically important to also think about faith. You need to think about, if you're targeting are you targeting a book mainly at Christians, primarily, or potentially is it of all faiths, or potentially, or looking at a certain denominational bias? Your aim may well be, and many people's aim is to write a truly ecumenical book, and that is absolutely fine. That is what I set out to do. But I did it knowing that my background, initially as a Baptist and then later as an Anglican, would influence how I would write and consequently how my writing would appeal to others. So I suggest you also have a think about your own denominational background and who might best be able to connect with your specific experiences. So that's attitude and opinions. Secondly, what kind of education did they have? I include this in here because knowing people's educational background helps you to understand how people might consume information. Those who are more widely read might appreciate a more literary approach and, for example, use of literary references. Whereas those who spent less time focused on formal education may appreciate a more practical and down-to-earth approach. There are always exceptions, of course, but it's a good guide, that. I think both are equally valid, but you must know who you're actually writing for. I want to come on to behavioural now. So behavioural. First of all, think about, what are your readers' church-going habits? Are you targeting your book at mature Christians who have a long and deep relationship with the church, or maybe younger Christians who are just setting out in faith on their faith journey? You may be targeting your book at a broader audience of occasional Christians who turn up a Christian at Easter, Christian or at Easter time, or maybe you're trying to reach out to seekers, people who are really only at the very, very beginning of their faith journey. This is really important because it affects your tone and how you write. One thing I would say at the outset as a golden rule is you always need to avoid using Christian jargon. But if you're talking to a more mature Christian audience, you can assume a greater understanding of concepts such as salvation and redemption, which to a seeker or somebody who's less familiar with church may seem a little alien, they may not understand. So it's really important to understand your readers' church-going habits, where they are on their faith journey. And also think about, what do they do when they aren't at church or at work? What do they do with their leisure time? It's worth thinking this through, as it's often this aspect of readers' lives that can enable you to reach out to a broader audience. And in marketing, that's what's called the long tail. For example, I realised I'd spent so much of my life travelling that my book, although it was a Christian book, may well appeal to other travellers, real or armchair. So in Sea Change, what I did is really focus on how I experienced God in different parts of the world. And as a result, was able to reach out to these audiences. I was delighted to see that Sea Change is actually in the biography section of Waterstones rather than the religion section, which is wonderful because it means it's reaching out to a broader audience. And that's all because of the long tail, how you can actually tap into people's interests. So what kind of leisure pursuits or what kind of interests do you think your readers would go in for? Do they like adrenaline fueled pursuits like paragliding or hiking in the great outdoors, or are they more indoor types who like things like stamp collecting? You don't have to be too specific, but think about what might be the points of connection in your life that go beyond your purely your church experience. And finally, reading. This is so important. We are taking it as a given that your audience reads. But the key question is, what do they read? What other authors are they reading? What other types of books would be on their bookshelves? This is so important to think about. And I suggest you really spend some time thinking about this and make a list of potential books that they might read, and then go out and buy or borrow a few of the books on this list and read them. Because in doing this, it's going to help you to get inside the head of your reader. So I think that's one of the most important things I can suggest you do at the very outset. Finally, geographic. Where are your readers located? What continent are they mainly based in? And don't just say worldwide, although that is every publisher's hope, and I do come on to that. But is your book primarily focused, for example, on a particular country? Is it primarily focused on a UK audience? Or, you know, it might well be that, Christabel, you know, you're looking at maybe a sub-Indian continent, audience. It may be an audience particularly in Bangladesh or elsewhere. But you need to think about, are there specific aspects about your story that actually speaks about a particular country? If you're hoping to break, it's also worth thinking about if you're hoping to break into other English-speaking markets such as America or Australia as well. And I think it's also worth thinking about, are there aspects of your book that, if at a micro level, will appeal to people in a particular area? Now, I knew, for example, that Sea Change would appeal to people in Australia because part of my book, Sea Change, is set in Australia, and the book was actually marketed in Australia. But I also knew that I would have buyers much closer to home in my little area of North Buckinghamshire where I live, because they would enjoy reading sections of the book that are about my life here. So what I suggest you do is really think this through by continent, first of all, by country, and then by local area as well. Because all of these are relevant, and think, what are the points of connection in my story that I can make with people at these different levels? Now, I appreciate there's rather a lot there. As I said, to help think through this, I'm going to provide you with a template to help you do the work. So during each stage of this course, again, Olive will testify to this, I give homework. There's work to do in between the various sessions. And during each stage of the course, I provide you with templates to help you think through everything from understanding your readers to structuring your story arc and the different aspects and character development. And all these are actually made available in a private Facebook group, which you have access to when you sign up for the full course. But for this taster session, session 1, I'll be making the templates available on my website, katenicholas.co.uk, My Soul Story. So you'll be able to access them after the session there. I also want to encourage you to develop an avatar or a persona, which is a composite of all these different readers you'll be thinking about. So first of all, do this work on a template. And once you've done this, you're going to see a number of different readers are going to appear. And I want you to think about a composite of them. Now, when I go into the studio to record my TV show, I do it without an audience. I'm literally just speaking into a camera. And in order to do this well, I imagine that I'm speaking to one person who's actually watching. I try to imagine who they are, where they are, and how they might be feeling today as they're listening to me. Now, a persona is the author's equivalent of that. And when you write, you always need to keep your audience in mind. And one of the best ways to do this is to come up with this persona. Once again, I'm going to provide you with a template to help you do this. So in order to create this persona, we need to think about some of the things we've just gone through. So you need to think about the age, gender, occupation, and family size. the attitudes and opinions including their denomination and education. You need to think about their church habits, leisure habits, and what else they might be reading, and also where they live. But in creating this persona, you also need to think about their hopes and their dreams. Go a bit deep. What are their hopes and their dreams in life? And what are the challenges they face in life? What is it that actually keeps them awake at night? And what's the problem that they're trying to solve, or the deep felt needs that they may be trying to fill? For example, they might be struggling with teenagers who are having difficulties. They may be having difficulties in their marriage or something else. And they may be looking to see how other Christians have dealt with this particular problem. Or they may just be wondering where God is in the face of adversity and needing assurance that he meets us in our suffering. And they're looking for that through seeing other people's stories. So think about what their needs might be and what it is that they may be trying to solve. And then consider, what are they looking for in a book? Are they looking for inspiration? Are they looking for examples of faith? Are they looking for guidance? Are they looking for reassurance? Or are they just looking for ways to reflect? So in creating the reader composite, you begin to build a really rounded picture of the person or the people you're trying to read, you're trying to write for. And what I suggest is that once you've done all this, give them a name. And also, even see if you can find a picture of someone you think they might look like. You just go onto Google Docs and Google Images and find an image of someone. It's just for you. Now, you probably will find that when you do this exercise, you're going to come up with more than one persona. You might have one male and one female. You might have one churchgoer, one seeker. And it's okay to have 2 or 3 personas. That's absolutely fine, because it represents the breadth of the audience that you're trying to write for. The really, really important point is this: you need to be able to imagine them and to imagine how they're thinking and how they're feeling. It's so important to write for an audience, and you'll be more successful if you keep this person in mind when you're writing, and remembering always that you're writing for them. Now, one thing, I can't actually turn around my computer, but what I do is I've actually got photographs of my readers on my pin board. So one thing to do is actually to pin up your persona with a photograph and have it in front of you wherever you decide you're going to write. I actually write in this space here, and actually I do come on to writing spaces in the next session of the course. But I think creating a space where you can focus on readers is very, very important. So I've hit you quite a lot here, and I think I'm going to stop kind of feeding you with more work to do at the moment. You've got a lot of homework to do here. First of all, you need to go and focus on who is your key audience by using the template I'm providing, looking at demographics, psychographics, behaviour and geography. And then secondly, you're going to come up with 1 or more named personas to keep in mind when you're writing. Now, I can't emphasize enough that this is such important foundational work, which we will actually use to go on and do the critical work of defining your offer or your central theme. And that's the golden thread that runs throughout your story, which helps to draw together all the most important salient parts of your journey into something that people can really access and that can be truly transformative. And it's this offer or theme that helps you to structure your story and shape your story, and also to be able to sell your book to potential publishers and readers. So this work is absolutely essential for this next stage in the journey. And what I've been doing today is going to help you pack the necessary resources in your backpack for your journey ahead. But what you also need is a clear vision of where you're heading to, a good roadmap to guide you, and various other tools to help you write in this in a really compelling way and share in a really compelling way to your account of your walk with God. My aim is to equip you with all of those things through my online course. So over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be offering 3 90-minute live Zoom sessions. And in session 2, we look at the discipline of writing, including how long you can expect to take to write a book, as well as useful tools for authors. We'll take a look at the work you've done on defining your reader, and then use it and look at how to use it to clearly define your offer. We then will begin to look at how you can use literary techniques which tend to be more commonly used in fiction to help you turn your book into a real life page turner. And that includes the art of storytelling, but also structures and formats that can be used in order to develop your plot and your story arc. In the 3rd session, we look at the next stage of structuring your autobiography or memoir, including plot points, and look at storyboarding, including how to look at your story in terms of dramatic units, creating suspense from the first page in order to keep your readers reading. We also look at how to really immerse your reader in your story, including how to develop key characters. And yes, you do have characters in an autobiography. And the art of writing convincing dialogue, which can be very important. We also begin to look at some of the elements you need to think about as you prepare to send a book to publishers' consideration, including front matter, including introductions and prologues, and end matter, which includes citations and endnotes, and the process of capturing these as you're writing. Then in the final session, we look at the art of editing, including reviewing guidelines and some specifics on Christian writing. And we also look at some of the legal issues to be considered and style guides. I then come on to the business of getting your book published, including how to find publishers and literary agents, and looking in depth at what both are looking for in a book, with guidelines as well on how to submit your manuscript. And getting this far is a real achievement, but of course that's also, as I found out as an author, when the hard work begins promoting your book. So we also touch on some of the basics of book promotion. Now, as part of the course, you have access to a private Facebook group where you connect with and share with other Christian writers. The others on this course are cohort of this course, and you can also access all the material shared for however long you need. And you also have access to downloadable templates to help you with refining your book structure, plotting your story, and character development. Now, all of this, the sessions take place at 7 p.m. From Monday to September the 14th for 3 weeks. And each session is live on Zoom. We allow plenty of time for questions, and the recordings are available to access as well anytime on our private Facebook group. Now, the cost of this course is usually £450, but I'm currently offering this at the heavily discounted rate of £145. And in addition, I'm making available 5 limited offer gold packages, which include a review of your templates. I review your templates and make recommendations. And in addition, you also have the option to take up a special offer on an additional one-to-one support package, which includes a workshop, one-to-one workshop with me to help plotting your story arc and storyboarding. And also the opportunity to have your manuscript reviewed by a leading Christian publisher. Now, one of the things that most people find most daunting about the whole process of writing a book is the hurdles you go through to get your book published. But as part of this whole package, I'm actually offering the chance to have your book read by the editing team of a leading Christian publisher. And they provide a reader's report highlighting areas for consideration to help you with any rewriting. And once you've received the report and actioned any recommendations they've made, they actually invite you to submit your work to be reviewed for potential publication. Now, it's important to say I can't guarantee you'll get a contract, but it is an amazing opportunity, and it's an incredible route into a major Christian publisher who actually specialises in autobiographies and memoirs. And they've said that even if they feel if the manuscript isn't quite right for them quite right now, they will advise on alternatives that you might like to consider. So all you have to do to take part in the rest of the course is to access the optional support, and to access the optional support package is to go to my website, katenicholas.co.uk, My Soul Story. And if you go onto that site, you'll be able to access the templates from today's session. You'll also be able to access a recording of this first session. I know a couple of people came a little bit late. Don't worry, you can actually go back and you can actually listen to the beginning of this. So those will be available on my website as of tomorrow morning. I also want to let you know about a special offer from Aslan Christian Books. When you become a published author, you'll get very used to this, promoting your books. Your publisher will always tell you to do this. But Aslan Christian Books are offering discounts on my best-selling memoir, Sea Changed, and the accompanying reflection guide at the moment. Sea Changed usually retails at £9.99 sterling. They're currently offering it for £6.99. And the companion guide retails normally for £7.99, and they're offering it for £5.99. So to take advantage of this offer, go to aslanchristianbooks.com, or again, if you just go to my website, katenicholas.co.uk, you can actually access this on the homepage. So I give you a lot of information, and I now want to open up for questions, because I'm sure you'll have some. So anyone got any questions?
I was trying to get back.
I can hear somebody speaking, but I can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, yes.
I can't hear what you're saying, sorry.
I was trying to get full view back, but we've still got your question thing there up.
I'll stop sharing. Yes, I
actually found it quite daunting to hear what you've got to say. So I'm sort of a bit in shock.
Bless you. It is not a small undertaking, and I'm being very honest about that. It is the most incredibly worthwhile thing I think I've done in my life. I think looking back over my life and seeing where God has been at work in this way, and actually looking and using this kind of methods of looking back and seeing how he's been at work has been incredible. And the impact my book has had has been extraordinary. But I'm not going to pretend to you that, if you're going to undertake, and I talk about in the first session, some of the ways in which you can discipline yourself, and it takes discipline. If you're going to do this, it takes discipline. What I can do is help you with tools to help you do that. And that's very much what this course is designed to do. It's all the things I wish I'd had when I started out, which I ended up creating for others because I wish I'd had them. It is daunting, but this is designed to help you through this process. But I'm not going to pretend, if you're going to do this, it takes discipline, it takes commitment. But it is a wonderful thing to do, a wonderful thing to do.
I have a question.
Hello, Michael, hi.
Okay. I feel like I've had a book in me for years, and I think from what you've described, it comes more under the memoir section, where it's not an autobiography, it's more of encounters and experiences and pictures and dreams and visions I've had over the years that I felt God wanted me to put in a book and share. Yeah. Does that fit in this category, Kate? Is this the sort of course I would benefit from to write that sort of material?
Yes, I think you would. In actual fact, the principles I use, I've just recently done some work with somebody else who's actually doing kind of a reflection guide. And many of the principles that I use actually apply as well, because you still need to create a page turner. You still need to tell a story. Even when I wrote my reflection guide, there is a story to it, because you still have to use the same kind of techniques in order to ensure that your readers keep reading, to hook your readers to begin with and to keep reading. And I find this whole idea of a story arc, which I talk about, actually can help tremendously, even if you're actually not writing, strictly speaking, an autobiography. It helps you to actually create a story to how you present those ideas.
Yeah, I get that. Great. So that's good. So I fit the category.
Yeah, I think but when I am talking particularly about autobiographies and memoirs, I think what you're talking about, I think would fit into that memoir category. And certainly I would always recommend, if anyone was actually planning on sharing those kind of experiences, it was done in a form that used a story arc.
Right. That sounds really good. a very practical question. In terms of payment, Kate, what sort of payment do you expect?
It actually just goes straight through. You go through my website, it takes you to something called Big Cartel. And you just literally can click on a link and it's got a little online shop I use.
Okay.
Very easy.
Okay.
I've been told. Olive, you did it. It was easy, wasn't it?
Initially, yeah, I've got to do the extra bits. I haven't been a bit busy today, but I want to do the extra amount because I want to, yeah, get things done and checked out. And I think the first time round, I'll be honest with you, I was daunted. But the way I found you on I put a Facebook onto my phone. The way I found you was, I know, by not just sheer accident. And years ago, God said, you've got to write it. I felt the need to write a book. And I kind of not wanting to. And my first language is Welsh, so but I'm more English now than Welsh because I've spent more years living in England. And yeah, I feel better now this time round, and I thank you for inviting me back on, because last time I just felt it was way over my head and I didn't know where to, and I kind of see it now in a bit of a more mathematical way. And you know, yeah, and I think writers have to be mathematical and the way to rearrange things. And I know later on you do, like I have a wall with things on it, and I thought,
yeah,
wow. Yeah,
what we do is we do the storyboarding. Yeah,
yeah. And I have to admit, I was amazed with it all, and I think everything went over my head last time, but I couldn't put this idea down, and it's been haunting me. So I'm going to go
wonderful,
for it.
wonderful to have you back. It's wonderful to have you back.
Thank you.
If you want to go through the rest of them again with me, I don't mind. That's fine. You can just go through them again if you want. But you've actually got access to all the recordings. What happens is you have access to all the recordings on a Facebook group, so you can always go back again. And I interact with people. I'm interacting with people on Facebook, on emails. So if you've got questions, I don't just deliver it and disappear. And what I do is I have this thing called a gold package, where it's just, I think it's I can't remember how much my cost for that now. It's about £205, I think it is. And what happens then? You actually send me all the templates, and I go through them. I go backwards and forwards, reviewing and making recommendations. And I think that's people who've done that, to say, really helped a lot. So they kind of, I'm helping them with the shaping of it.
Yeah.
And to say I can do this one. This all came from doing one-on-one workshops with authors originally, full day workshops, face-to-face workshops. So I can do a mini version of that, where I do a 3-hour Zoom, which is this support package thing, which includes sending something to a publisher. So there are different levels of it, but certainly, you know, to begin with, if you do decide to do the straight course, you get access to the Zoom meetings where we have discussions as well. We can have continuing discussions on the Facebook group page. You get access to the templates, get access to the Zoom recordings, so you can go back over them again. And you can always ask questions of me. I'm quite responsive, I think.
Thank you. That's great.
Kate, hi, it's Amanda.
Hello, Amanda. Hi there. Great to see you on the call.
Yeah, thank you for all the information you gave. It was really, really helpful. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, actually, knowing what to write about, what if you don't know what God is asking you to write about? You know, what if, like, what one of the person who just who asked the question, you know, if it's it could be about, maybe, you know, you're a dreamer and, you know, you want to write about that, but you also got other stuff like maybe your life experiences, but you really don't know what God is saying to write about. But you know, God is saying write a book, but it can be there, like, you don't know, you've gone through different experiences. Sometimes it can feel like a while ago, and I don't know. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Big question. I'm not sure I can answer that immediately now. I think possibly what I would say, potentially we should have a chat offline, and maybe have a chat offline about that. And I think certainly pray about it. I'm going to say the amount of prayer that goes into all the books that I write is immense. Before I start writing anything, the book Soul Scribe is coming out on February the 12th. Really is designed to help you think through that process in a lot of detail. So it's almost the process before you decide to write. So I would say read Soul Scribe when it comes out. I wish it was out now, but it's, you know, my wonderful publishers are doing their best to get out as fast as they can. But that is designed to help you think through some of that process. So why don't we have a chat offline, but certainly read Soul Scribe when it comes out. But I would say, being honest with you, I think it'd be too early for you to do this course right now. I think you probably need to have, I think you're sort of step back from that. I would suggest that I'll be running this course again in the new year. I think probably then I would say do it maybe next year, but don't do it now, I would say.
Okay, so I shouldn't do it now.
I think it's too early right now. I think let's have a separate offline conversation, read Soul Scribe, and then I think maybe a bit later on.
Okay, lovely.
Marissa, my dear.
Hi. Are there any taboo subjects? So I've been penning a sort of fiction because I just thought I can't name and shame people, and people know who I am. And so I had this huge dilemma of, you know, there is an issue that really needs addressing, which I feel very strongly about. And I went over to Bethel Church in Redding in California, and they said, oh, you're a writer. And I said, no, I've not actually written anything yet. And during lockdown, I really felt that maybe I should just be honest and write a book that was going to help other people. But are there any taboo subjects? And where do you draw the line between a memoir and whether I should hide myself behind some fiction somewhere?
One things I go into in session 3 and 4 is the legal issues, which do have to take into account. I can tell you now, hiding yourself behind a fiction, but doing this fictionally will not save you from any kind of legal issues. Okay. And I don't think it's a good idea to do at all. I think you're far better writing an authentic book, which is sensitive and takes into account some of the kind of legal aspects, which I can go into. But a lot of people come unstuck thinking, oh, if I fictionalize this, it'll be fine. It is not. I go into the whole issue about law of defamation, which actually applies if somebody recognizes themselves in any way, shape, or form, whether fictional or otherwise, and you've said something which is defamatory about them, they have every right to come after you, whether it's fictional or otherwise. And some people think things like, if I don't give a name or change the name, it doesn't work. I go into that in detail. So I would say you're far better writing an authentic book. And I don't think any subject is taboo. Okay. I think it's how you handle it. We have to think about how you handle it.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Anne, sorry, you got your hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me, Kate?
I can, yes, Wendy, yeah.
Yeah. It was just to ask you, I guess a bit like other people, to I have a very specific idea, and I've already started to do some work around that. But I guess my question is, because I was happy to hear you say that your book has to be very practical and speak to a need, because this book, I have dealt with a lot of anxiety in my life, and I've dealt with a lot of anxiety disorders, and that's what that would be speaking to. But I guess when I started to write about this, I realized that it would be quite dry, and I wanted to be very practical. But I guess my question to you is, I guess at some point I began to realize that it would have to be, well, people would have to pick it up, and that would mean that it would have to be less dry. But I guess my question is, can you write an autographic, or I can't even say that, but
no, I know it's difficult to say.
A book about my story and overcoming that, but marry it together with very, very practical information for people, so that they can be guided through those processes too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
as you know, since I left World Vision, I retrained and I am now a therapist. So that would be my ideal, to marry those two things together for people, not just to offer them. Okay, that's okay.
Absolutely. No, I think very, very powerful. So that's what I was talking about some you can take two different approaches. You know, you can take a very literary approach where actually you're just absorbing somebody completely in your journey, but you can also combine that with, you know, you can also then tell your story in a very authentic way, but then also give people practical advice as a result of that. Many books were, well, actually, ironically, Soul Scribe, which is coming out, does exactly that. It actually takes some of my life journey and combines it with a very practical approach. So yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be touching on an issue which is very live for very many people. So I think, yeah, that a book about this kind of issues, I think, will be very important.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions? See what time it is now. It's almost time to let you go. But any other questions at all?
No, that's been really helpful. Thank you so much for your session.
Oh, it's quite all right. It's lovely to see people on here. And yes, so I don't want to put anybody off taking the course, Amanda, but I do think that I think it's worthwhile thinking, be at a certain stage of thinking, at least knowing roughly. All you need to do is know roughly what it is you're trying to write. And if it's based upon your life story, then you bring your life story with you. So, and we can develop it out of that. But I think if you're much further than back in that, not quite sure whether you want to write an autobiography or not, or whether you want to write a completely different type of book, then it may be too soon for you, Amanda. But I think, you know, if you know that you want to write an autobiography or memoir, then I think through this course, I can help you think what that will look like and what shape it will take. So that's my answer. So I don't want to say, well, don't do the course, but at the same time, I don't want someone to do the course and then not. You need to at least reach that stage and know, I want to write an autobiography or memoir of some kind.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's important what you're saying, and I think it's so true. I've written a devotional, which is probably you know, I went through a difficult time in 2015, and God put, you know, every time I read the word, he gave me stuff to write. So I've actually have a blog, which I've written about 75 devotionals on. So I think maybe I need to focus on that. And then from then, maybe like what you said, just focus on that work, putting that together for now as a devotional. And then, you know, praying to God more and asking him, because I know he wants me to release that one, and asking him in terms of the biography, autobiography, or the, what do you call it? Whether it's what's that one? The memoir.
Memoir, yes, memoir, yeah.
Yeah, because I also feel like a biography it's quite tough, because I feel like I want to talk about stuff that I've been through, but at the same time I feel a bit like, oh my God, they're gonna know I went through this, and so I'm having to maybe deal with that aspect of me. So maybe you're right. I have to deal with that part of me, being able to be vulnerable and you know, sharing my experience, because that takes something else, you know, to get there. And then so you're right, I need to definitely pray for clarity and just trust God on that.
I think it's a very important word there. Vulnerable. I remember when I wrote Sea Change and I realized that I was going to survive, I actually, a friend of mine encouraged me to send to a publisher. I sent to the publisher. It was amazing, because they immediately came back and said they wanted to see a copy of it. And I was slightly horrified, because I thought that that I was going to have time to kind of do some kind of rewriting of it and whitewashing it slightly, as I now knew I was going to be around. But this is a book written by a woman who thought she was going to die and wasn't going to have to answer to anybody. And when I got such a response from the publisher immediately, I thought, oh my goodness. It was a friend actually told the publisher about it. And God stayed my hand, so I couldn't actually kind of like do any re-editing of it. The thing that everyone said to me is the power of that book is in its vulnerability, your willingness to be vulnerable. So I would say, if you're embarking on this journey and you want to write a book that's going to transform other people's lives and inspire others, you need to pray about it and think and say, I am willing to show the vulnerable parts of myself, because that is how God works. God told us, he told Paul, I work through your weakness. you know. And so I think there's something profound there about being willing to say, I'm going to let God work through my weakness. I'm going to let God work through my vulnerability. And that's where you can speak so deeply into other people's lives. And it's a God-given mission.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's lovely to see everybody on here. It's been really, really great. I hope you feel inspired and encouraged in some way to do this. And I really hope to see some, if not some of you, at the next course session, which will take place next Monday on September the 14th. And in that one, I'll begin the journey of looking at the discipline of writing and how to begin structuring your story, thinking about your theme, thinking about the golden thread, and how to begin the process of structuring your story and actually begin to write a book. So if you're interested in going further, please go back to my website, go to katenicholas.co.uk. You can actually just go to the home page and it takes you through to My Soul Story, or you can do the My Soul Story, and it can tell you there how to sign up for the rest of the course and also to access the templates. And by tomorrow morning, there'll be a recording of this up there as well. So until then, thank you so much, and go in love and peace, in the peace of Christ.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bless
God
you
bless
too.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.